Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more.
Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart, and today I'm joined by B2C marketer, Jenell Riesner. Today, we are taking a bit of a different tack. I think there's a lot, it's kind of carrying the tradition of landing the year with marketing in mind and thinking about through the lens of as salespeople, as sales development people, and sales leaders, how can we work better with our folks on the other side of the fence? What can we learn from them? How do we get more 1 + 1 = 3 out of the relationship with our marketing friends? Now, this one is interesting because Jennell's a B2C marketer. We had a ton in common with our history when we first met, and it was super interesting that some of the advice she was sharing was almost exactly the word for word things I had shared with sales development reps. And so I thought it'd be a really interesting conversation to see how people on even the B2C side and how what we can learn from them on the B2B sales development side was relevant. She had a really interesting approach to Black Friday that I think every SDR team should steal. We talked a little bit about preempting buying windows. I'll kind of tease you with that, and I'll let you listen if you want to check that out. But the other interesting piece that I pulled out of this interview was understanding the barriers as a sales development rep trying to book a meeting with somebody. The most helpful thing we can do is understand the barrier that's getting in the way of them making the next step, and then find some free content, whether we create it or our marketing team creates it, and build an offer around it of, hey, I've got, I imagine you're struggling with this particular piece. Here's a piece of content. This is how I could be helpful. And we kind of landed on getting buyers to share their communication preferences and then customizing our campaigns and how we interact with them to their preferences, and why and how to do that as a sales development team, I think is super interesting. So this was a fun conversation I didn't expect to have on this podcast, but I think there's a lot to learn. So with that said, here's the episode. Jennell, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited too. I want to start with, let's talk about your Black Friday. I know we're talking B2C today, but I know, and we actually planned this episode well before, and then we thought we would do it after, so we could kind of do a before and an after kind of sneak peek. So talk to me about Black Friday, and we'll dive into sort of some of the promotions and what worked well, but I'd love to hear sort of what's changed since we did the pre-interview.
Yeah. So I can talk a little bit about our strategy overall and just some of the things that we're seeing in the market and the world of advertising and how that's affected our approach. So when it came to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, I think any marketer or advertiser knows that the cost basically per lead just continues to increase, and it's a pretty saturated market around the time of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So one of the things that we really wanted to focus on is how could we take our ad budget and really, optimize as much as possible and get the most bang for our buck, so to speak. So we actually did some promotions leading up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the entire month of October, when lead costs were lower and we knew that there would be less competition. And that was also really to build up our list and our engagements, whether that be mailing list, as well as just getting people to visit our social media and to be able to retarget and really start to build up that audience at a time when things weren't so congested. And then heading into Black Friday, Cyber Monday, being able to really more so retarget those people at a lower cost, in addition to getting some new people as well. So that was a bit about our strategy just leading into it and kind of taking a different approach, because we all know, if people joke, it's like, oh, Cyber Monday, Black Friday, and it's really just almost a month long promotion nowadays. So even you look at the month of November and you're still fighting with a pretty congested and crowded month. So that was something we wanted to factor in as we looked at all of Q4, is how could we maybe take some of those lesser advertised times and really utilize that to build up into our strategy for the actual event.
Cool. I love that. And so if I'm understanding correctly, it's instead of doing a huge push the week of, or maybe 2 weeks ahead of Black Friday, you added a month, uh, you ramped up a month early when cost to acquire customers' attention was cheaper. And then for Black Friday, you just focused on retargeting the people that had just come into that funnel.
Exactly. So that was a huge
Ah,
part. October was actually our bigger sales month than end of November was, which is kind of interesting. But still, getting those basically 2 large peaks rather than a single large peak, and extending the amount of time that we were focusing on pushing out.
interesting. So October was actually bigger than November.
It was, yep.
Is that surprising or expected, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so for us, it was expected. One of the things, so, a little, I guess, taking a step back about the type of business we're into, we are a franchise. And so one of the things that we're focusing on for our team is really kind of that top of funnel, or in the fitness industry, it's basically someone going from opt-in to intro. And so we spend most of our time at HQ focusing on that part. But one of the things that we wanted to support our franchisees with is having all of those people already in the funnel when it comes to their Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales. So when I'm talking to kind of top of funnel or leading people in, there's a secondary piece to it of, can those people then sell memberships to this basically big push that we did prior to Black Friday, Cyber Monday? Because a lot of times in the fitness industry, that funnel takes a little bit more time. It's not like a consumer item where it's like, oh, I'm going to buy a pair of weights. It's, maybe I don't know what y'all do. I want to try it out. Okay, I had the opportunity to try it out. Now I'm looking at a bigger ticket item or a higher commitment for a longer period of time. So rather than trying to shorten the sales cycle, which of course we all like, but we know that consumers don't always comply with that. And it makes sense. It's just not, we're like, hey, sign up for a year. And they're like, I don't know you. So we wanted to be able to sort of do that process earlier. So that way, when Cyber Monday, Black Friday came up, we did see an increase in membership sales, but not necessarily that upfront intro, which is what we focus on at the national level a little bit more.
Interesting. So they're kind of like kids. Like you can tell them whatever you want, but they're probably not going to listen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. I always say when it comes to consumers, yes, you can nudge people, in a certain direction, and you can inspire them to think differently. But it's a lot easier just to work with how people already work, right? Versus, oh, let's change people's behavior. That's a lot more work than saying people behave this way. Let's flow down, basically go downstream with the river versus trying to swim upstream.
It's it totally resonates with on the sales side as well. And I always think of the Michael Scott quote, and I don't know all of it, but it's basically Michael Scott from The Office, like, don't do anything. Don't ever for any reason do anything to anybody, no matter who you are, where you're going, or where you've been, or something like that. And it's like, basically just don't try and do anything other than help them. I mean, he was obviously going on a strange rant and he didn't know where he was going to finish the quote, but when I heard it, I was like, this sounds so silly, but it actually kind of sounds true. Like you can only help them and kind of sit there and assist. And I think the days of like, I don't know if there ever were days where marketing could like dupe people into buying something that they didn't want to buy. But I lived through some marketing and I lived through some sales days, and I don't think I ever experienced any campaigns where I was able to, fully dupe people. Though I did start my marketing days selling wheelchair lifts and accessibility lifts, and those aren't exactly impulse purchases.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's similar, I guess, in fitness too. Like I said, you can impulse buy maybe an intro offer, an offer that's a lower barrier to entry, but you're not probably going to impulse buy a 12-month membership. And then that's a higher ticket item, especially in boutique studios. So it is actually quite similar. It's not, you're not Planet Fitness where it's like, oh, buy a membership, but it's $15 a month. It's buy a membership, but you're probably going to be paying above 150 a month, and you're committing for, anywhere from 3 to 12 months. So probably actually similar in that sense, where it's like, hey, we have to build a relationship here before we can actually earn your trust and really earn that, lifelong membership and member that we want.
And kind of speaking of which, it's a really nice place to kind of cut in here. Can you talk to me about the type of people that you're targeting with these types of campaigns? Obviously, for those who haven't, maybe I'll just say it succinctly. The company is iLoveKickboxing. You're the CMO for the whole franchise and the franchisees. You're obviously doing work on behalf of the franchisees to try and help them earn business. But specifically, can we talk about the personas that you're trying to reach for these franchisees?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really loved when I was joining the team about I Love Kickboxing is that our target market is actually slightly different than what you might see in traditional boutique fitness. I would say, a lot of competitors in the space, generally, they are focused on someone who is a little bit more connected to fitness. Maybe they go to a lot of different boutique fitness studios. And I Love Kickboxing really has always focused on women ages 26 to 55 that are almost that couch to fitness type persona. So
Mhm.
people that either really have no fitness experience, maybe they're coming from a big box gym like in, LA Fitness, Planet Fitness, or they just haven't worked out in a really long time, whatever it may be, but they're normally coming back into their fitness journey. And so what's really fun for us, and as a marketer and someone who loves nurturing and doing email marketing, is there's a lot that you can do with that relationship in order to really build a connection with them, to reduce friction for that type of persona who is maybe more timid. And if we're being honest, I mean, kickboxing is a hard workout. So we also get these people, and again, typically women that maybe they haven't worked out in years, but they have that little glimmer in their eyes of, I'm terrified to do this, but something inside of me thinks I can. And those are the people that show up. And that is a fun persona and a person, an
Mhm.
individual that we get to build relationships with. So that's, yeah, really the people that we target and kind of our bread and butter in the industry. And then of course we do work with people that are, traditional fitness enthusiasts or want to switch up their workout or want to try kickboxing. But what we really do focus on is that target market.
Cool. And I can attest, it is any sort of martial art, walking into a gym for the first time, it's kind of scary. It's
Yeah.
intimidating. I remember my first time. I actually did kickboxing, and I happened to be cleaning up my office, and I was like, oh, I'll carry this one in and just leave it here, because
Yeah.
I've talked about it a lot, and I'm like, where is it? And I couldn't find it, but it was sitting back there.
That's
But it
awesome.
is a scary, it's an intimidating sport. It's an intense workout. And so to get somebody to walk them across that line, that's gotta take some interesting campaigns. So I'd love to, so we've talked about the couch to fitness person. I'm curious the channels, like what are you using to reach this person? And maybe before we get into the channel, I guess what is the messaging? What is the offer? What is that hook that you put in to pull them across the line to get them to say, take that glimmer and say, I can do this. Now let's get you in the studio.
Yeah, so a lot of what we message is that you don't need experience. That's a huge part of it. Again, just for that market, it's like, hey, you don't need to do this. I've done this before.
Mhm.
A lot of it is around the offer. So how do you create a low barrier to entry for, again, someone who probably is questioning if they're going to fit in? Because a lot of what we focus on, just like many fitness communities, but is that connection point. How do we make sure that people not only are getting a good workout, but they feel supported? And if you look at a lot of our competitors, again, it's a little bit maybe more intimidating even by the people that are in there. A woman who is 55 and maybe pretty out of shape doesn't necessarily see herself in a lot of boutique fitness advertisements. She's most likely going to see a 25 to 30-year-old who's pretty fit, maybe has abs, and might look at that and think, oh, well, I'm not going to fit in there, or that's going to be too hard for me. So we've really tried to make all of our marketing really approachable for that persona, from the images, from the offer, to be like, just come in, just try, take 3 classes, take 5 classes, whatever it may be. And if you don't like it, cool, never come back. But we'll also try to hold a little accountability there too, because of course, sometimes it's not that people don't like it, it's that it's hard. It's hard to start a new fitness routine. So it's like, give us a couple shots, and see if you think you can do this, because we think you can do this. So we definitely try to use that quite a bit in our messaging as well, to get people in. And then again, just having that really low barrier to entry, just to make it as inviting as possible, so that, maybe price isn't just another upfront hurdle where people are like, I don't know if I'm going to like it, and it's expensive. That's obviously a lot harder to get someone to walk in the door and give it a shot, and really give themselves a shot too.
It's like I could see it being one of those things that seems really expensive until you do it and you're like, oh, I get it. This is super fun. I really like it.
Yeah, the value. I think people forget, to have that community, to be able to walk in and not think about it. I mean, that's a big thing for our consumers too, when they're coming from a box gym. It's like, okay, if you're going to a typical gym, you have to figure out what you're going to do. There's thought and there's effort on the individual when you go in there. No one's telling you what to do. There's not the
Mhm.
energy of the group. There's not the accountability of the group. It's kind of, you're just like on your own, and you can jump on a treadmill and, maybe say you're going to walk for 30 minutes, and then you get 15 minutes in, and no one's going to question if you jump off the treadmill. If you leave class early,
Yeah.
we'll probably check on you and make sure you're okay, of course, but we might be like, okay, well, like, could you maybe, tone it down a little bit, your intensity level, but, so you can increase your duration and make it through class. Like, we can do
Mhm.
things like that. You actually have a coach that can help you with that.
Love it. I love the offer. So let's get to the juicy stuff. Leading up to Black Friday, you ran these campaigns, and what I really, and I appreciate the context is super helpful, and like the meaty stuff to me, because I'm trying to think about, we get a lot of founders and sales leaders and salespeople listening. I'm like, and they're probably thinking, again, I probably said it in the intro, but like, why is this B2C marketing person coming in here to talk about kickboxing? And I think the theory here is that one, I think the Black Friday, like preempting it and then retargeting, genius. I absolutely love that. And I don't think there's really as big of a deal in B2B, but I think that's a technique or a tactic that we can steal or borrow. And so I think there's probably some other things in here that we can learn from you. And so talk to me about what were your top 3 channels leading into or coming into this promotional season?
Yeah, and I'll answer that, but I'll add maybe a little bit more context too around the offer that maybe I haven't
Yeah.
included. The other thing is we actually switched our offer, which is not always, the best. There are pros and cons to switching up your offer, right? It can break through repetitiveness in marketing, but it can also create logistical issues, which I think we all know. I mean, if you're running a sales team, our franchisees are really like our sales team. So
Mhm.
you change an offer, you can kind of switch things up for them. But one of the things that we thought about with the offer is typically we do 3 and 5 classes as that intro offer. So shorter duration, sales cycles generally shorter if someone comes in and uses that offer probably within 2 weeks. We
Mhm.
actually extended it. So we did 30 days unlimited. And
Oh,
so the thought behind that was that people would still be engaging with us, and we would have their attention also going into Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So that was something that we played with too. And I think that applies to sales teams and marketers of, if you have an option or some sort of like free trial or something like that, playing with the duration so that you are actively participating at a time where maybe you're going to bump up against a sale. So that was kind of some of the thoughts and logistics around that, as well as we wanted people in studio still participating. So when those membership sales popped up, we
mhm.
weren't, a distant thought in the past, basically, both digitally and in person. So kind of a different strategy as well there.
I'm just worrying that this is going to be like everybody's trying to preempt everything. And so we're going to start getting into like February of this year, and it'll be like the pre Black Friday pre-sale.
Yep.
And then you're like, at what point is it the pre, or is it just like a thing that we're always doing?
Basically, Black Friday never ends at this point.
Yeah.
But that was, yeah. I was going to say, we played it around not Black Friday. All that was, we actually had our 10th anniversary. So it's kind of the stars aligned a little bit there too. That the sales we did in October were not Black Friday sales. They were for our 10th anniversary, but they fed into Black Friday. So we kind of separated them in the consumer's mind as well, that this wasn't like, hey, we're doing Black Friday for all of Q4. Different offers, different focus.
True. It just happened to, okay, so it was a nice spike. I am curious, maybe if I can ask a different question, because I do want to get into the channels. How do you think about promo and sort of campaigns and sequencing of things? Like you can't train every day, right? To go to the kickboxing example. And I mean, unless you want to be world champion. But chances are most of us can't train every day, and it's probably not necessarily healthy to train like a world champion. Well, it's definitely not healthy to train like a world champion because it does damage to your body with the extra wear and tear. And so when it comes to marketing campaigns, you can't push. I don't think you can push every single day. And so in my opinion, it's kind of like a crop rotation, theory about, looking at each quarter or each kind of sales buying cycle. I'm curious what your thoughts are on how do you think about planning these different sequence campaigns, promotional events, and then we can jump into the channels. But last sort of question of context.
Yeah, no, it's a super fun one. For us, a lot of times, going back to that analogy of not swimming upriver, we do look for times that we know that consumers are going to be looking for deals. So holidays, that everyone kind of has a deal on. And again, it's a double-edged sword because your cost per lead might go up, but then you get more people organically. So they're like, oh, well, maybe I was thinking about kickboxing and Memorial Day is coming up. Maybe they have a Memorial Day sale. And so you do just naturally get that spike from consumers being more in the mindset of, I'm going to spend money right now. So that's something that we do. And then we definitely try to work, which is the ebb and the flow of our seasonality as well. So fitness is maybe unique and a little bit different than B2B, but I'm sure you have, every industry has its own probably level of seasonality to some extent, where we might focus on sales more going into the summer because we know people are less likely to use their membership, whatever it may be, or we need that, kind of that bump maybe in cash flow, or that our owners would need that bump in cash flow going into a time that will slow down. So we generally kind of think about it almost from an owner standpoint of either, where can we do back-to-back deals like that, which is, I would say, less common, but that was kind of the momentum building, or where can we help our owners get a bump in cash flow or a bump in leads to basically sustain them in dips in seasonality. So maybe counterintuitive, one of the things that we do less of is we don't have to do anything crazy around the beginning of the year, because since consumers are generally going to jump back into a fitness routine. So rather than like highly discounting or things, it's like, no, people are more motivated to jump in. So we'll still have, some goodies or things you can add in, but we don't actually need to push as hard to maintain for our owners around those times.
Okay. I love it. I really appreciate in like the idea of sort of like preempting your busy seasons, or at least kind of factoring that into the plans. I think that's really smart.
Yeah. And it is, I think it comes from, our team has a lot of people that have owned studios. And we know that if you don't prepare for dips, then you're like, oh crap, I need cash flow right now. And, consumers aren't just going to be super stoked in the middle of July to be like, I'm going to get a gym membership. Again, you can't really fight that. So how can you just prepare for it?
Yeah, it's hard to compete with the beach and the forest and the lake and the ocean when you're in your studio. Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. So let's talk about, after all of this preamble, let's talk about the top channels. And so before we go deep on all of them, what were the top channels that you really focused on for these campaigns?
Yeah. So in general, we use a lot of paid media, specifically Facebook and Meta at this point. to really do the top of the funnel work, get people's attention. We talked about some of the messaging there of just providing imagery that speaks to people, that shows them themselves or an opportunity for themselves, sharing member stories. Even honestly for us, simple imagery of people punching and kicking is just like that captures people's attention, in a way that I wish I'm like could dive into psychological analysis of this, but it just does, like, it works. You put a picture of someone punching and kicking, especially a woman, it's like, oh, what am I seeing? People just seem to stop to scroll on that. So we use that a lot in top of funnel. But then some of my favorites, like I mentioned before, which I'm sure we'll get into, is more of how do we nurture that relationship once we have their first name, last name, email, maybe phone number. What do we do from there? And that's when we start to get into email and SMS, and just really how we engage with them and we provide value and continue to say, like, hey, we want to have a long-term relationship with you. We're not a one and done type sale experience. So we treat our marketing in that same way.
Gotcha. So is it fair to say that the paid media is sort of the generating a lot of the first touch attribution, and that
Yep,
email and
100%.
SMS are more like middle and late stage?
100%. We say generally for benchmarks for our studios, about 40% of their leads are generally coming from some form of paid media, again, typically Facebook ads. And then a lot of what we do is also referral based. So that's another huge slice of the pie, and just saying, like, hey, you like this. Do you know someone else that would like this? And we will incentivize you for, sharing I Love Kickboxing with other people. So those are really the two main ones that we focus on for top of funnel, in addition to more local marketing. So for us, obviously, we're very community focused, and how can people get to, farmers markets, build relationships with people in their community, work with schools, work with colleges, things that are almost sometimes in this digital marketing world seem obsolete, but are actually really important for this type of model.
Awesome. I want to start at the top of the funnel, with which sounds like paid media. And so
Yeah.
can we talk about, for listeners, kind of where we're going to go is we'll do paid media, then we'll do either email or SMS next. And what I'm going to ask is sort of talk to me about what these campaigns look like from a B2C marketer's CMO's perspective, or I'll talk about some of the benefits and then some of the benchmarks. And so we're going to loop through paid media, email, and then SMS. And so Jenell, starting with the sort of paid media, talk to me about, you mentioned a little bit about these campaigns, and it's the women kickboxing on Facebook, Meta, whatever we call it, Instagram, all the socials. That's all the ones I can remember off the top of my head. So yeah, talk to me about what these campaigns look like, because I imagine it's more than just pictures of people kickboxing.
Yeah, I mean, for these, it really is grounded in that intro offer that we've talked about. So that's, kind of the basic funnel. We, just like anyone, I mean, obviously do a lot of testing, but typically that's sort of our main focus nationally, is the offer, the imagery. But then when it comes to the studios, we obviously encourage them to have testimonials, or if they can get any of their members on video, like that always works well for almost that, user generated content, taking it and repurposing it for ads. So that always seems to work really well, and people sharing their story, sharing their experience. And so our paid media is not actually that complicated. I think sometimes people are like, what are all the secrets? And it's really, no, there's no secrets. We just show our members sharing their experiences, and then we have a great offer that people see. And if they have even a bit of interest, it makes sense to buy. Right now our prices are $30 or $40 generally to get in the door. So pretty low barrier of entry, especially in our industry, relatively. So it's like, okay, just come in and try it out. And we see pretty high conversions, as far as, almost 50% of the people on our site are going from opt-in to purchase right away.
Interesting. So talk to me about, like, what does the full funnel of your paid look like? So in terms of maybe we don't have to go into like the total spend in the top of the funnel,
Yeah.
but what is it starts on with paid, it would start on Facebook. Does it start on Google? Does it start on Instagram? Like, where does it start? what does it roughly cost kind of per click? And then you push them to your site, sounds like to a landing page. Yeah, just kind of walk me through that. And I'd love to understand some like stats or KPIs that you look at kind of as you progress through the funnel.
Yeah, so 100%. I mean, most of what we do is on Facebook right now. We do, a little bit of Instagram, a little bit of Google, a little bit of YouTube, but I would say Facebook is still, the main focus for us. Generally, when it comes to what we're looking for and benchmarks, I mean, cost per lead and cost per acquisition are obviously huge for us. I mentioned, right now our kind of our intro offers anywhere between $30 and $40. Well, ideally we're keeping our cost per lead below that, cost per acquisition around that. It's not always easy, right? It ebbs and flows, and that's why I said it's for us it's pretty critical, like the timing of when everyone else is flooding paid advertising spaces to try to keep ourselves sort of in that range so that we're not overpaying for all of those new leads ideally. So we do kind of try to focus on matching to that 1-to-1 ratio of if you are getting $30 and you get that $30 back pretty quickly when it comes to the cost of acquisition, at least. And then, yes, we do have landing pages that are, pretty basic for the most part. It's, hey, get the deal, fill out your information. If you haven't already on Facebook, it depends. We do both, or sometimes we just go direct to our website. Sometimes we use Facebook lead forms. Kind of just depends. And then from there, it's really the shopping cart experience. They check out, and that's kind of where we start to kick over to email and SMS and start to continue to like nurture them, get them in the studio, get them to book the class. There's a lot of steps in that funnel for us specifically where someone can spend $30, let's say, but if they never show up to class, that's not very helpful for us. So we need them to not only buy the offer, but then obviously book the class. And then we need them to show up for the class. And then ideally they show up for multiple classes, because in our industry, using the membership or using that intro offer is one of the biggest indicators that they'll actually go on to buy a membership, which again is a higher ticket item. If they're not using it, they're not going to spend that money. So we kind of do everything in our power to inspire and encourage and keep them coming back, because they win and they have a fitness routine and a fitness journey and are more likely to meet their goals. And then of course, we win because we get lifelong members that are loyal and happy, and hopefully spreading the word that they love what we do and that we've changed their lives.
It just kind of connected. Like, one of the reasons why I think this conversation was really interesting to me initially is there are so many parallels to the SaaS world, and getting somebody in with like either a freemium model or something like a product hunt, or was it AppSumo, where there's a bunch of like a ton of paid promotion. In the same way, your fitness is kind of one of the original recurring revenue businesses, up there with maybe like cable and cell phones and things like that. So it's really interesting to hear how you're thinking about it. Not to compare you to the cable company, but just
no offense taken.
shared similarities in your
100%.
business model.
Well, it's funny here, maybe not funny that you bring that up, but yeah, I mean, that's also my background. Between fitness and SaaS are kind of like the two places that, yeah, I've lived my world. So that recurring revenue, that membership is just sort of like the bread and butter. And again, I think it's fun because you are challenged more to provide a great service, a great product, great customer service, because it's not just a one and done, like, yay, you spend $1,000 and cool, enjoy, and people can do that well, of course, too. And of course you want to, have a good LTV and all these things, but if you don't do that in a recurring revenue model, you are not going to win. Hands down. It's, unless you're super stringent, I guess, about locking people into contracts, but no one wins from that either. And you're just going to get more bad reviews than anything. So
totally. Yeah. And to land the point, I think you 100% agree. I think I wanted to double underline your point of like, if people only ever buy the offer, if they only ever sign up for that intro, there's really no point. Like, yes, you kind of made your money back on the acquisition, but you come out about even, probably behind from a operating profit perspective, because you got to pay somebody to handle that conversation. You got to pay somebody to, run the gym while they're doing that. They got to pay you, and it probably doesn't factor. I don't know how much of your salary factors into their cost to acquire a customer, but I doubt it's a ton.
Not a lot. We do try to teach them to factor in if they're working with an agency, that and their return on ad spend.
Mhm.
But yes, and to your exact point, if you're only getting that $30 back and you're paying an agency, X amount per month, and you start to really look at all of those things, you need to get them in as members. That's the win.
Super interesting. I'm curious what kind of benchmarks are we talking about from like a Facebook or Meta to click on an offer to like sign up to activation. Like actually, I would say activation is like buying a recurring revenue, or sorry, recurring membership option.
Yeah. So end to end conversion, it depends on the offer. Obviously, it depends on the ads. I would say, to give you more of like a general number, it could be as low as 6 to 7%, and as high as potentially up to 20 to 25%. When you're really rocking and rolling, which is quite impressive. It's we see it every once in a while. Again, depends on the offer and what's going on, but that's kind of about where we're seeing our studios across the entire system. And again, it just depends on the offer too. And is there that monetary amount? Because sometimes our studios also run free classes. And so that kind of goes back to the SaaS model too of freemium. Obviously, end-to-end conversion is significantly different when they've never paid anything versus having to put a little skin in the game as a consumer.
Gotcha. So 6 to kind of 30% to click, or from clicking on the offer, or is that to purchase, from like clicked to purchased?
That's actually clicked to membership.
Clicked to membership?
So all the way through. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And 30% is very rare. So like, mind you, we only see it on like certain campaigns where we really crush, but I would say the average is more like 6 to 10-ish, but still, I mean, it's pretty good. Yeah.
That's very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody running marketing on your side knows what they're doing.
We have a pretty great team over here.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty exciting. 10%. I'd love to have 10% conversion on sort of to recurring member on any paid activities. I don't run our demand gen. So like maybe my math on our internal stuff is off, but from a sales and outbound perspective, that seems pretty strong. Pretty strong.
Yeah. We need
obviously
quite a bit. So that always helps.
Fair. I was going to say, obviously the paid media doesn't exist in a vacuum, because that'd be a pretty weird place for paid media to exist, literally. But there are other channels that sort of help it along the way. I've heard you talk about email. I've heard you talk about SMS. What's the next big one in terms of, I guess, moving down the funnel of paid media, and referrals are obviously that first touch. What comes next in your mind from a channel perspective?
Yeah, it is email to me. And I always preface this with my background is email marketing. I love it. I'm, the geek in my earlier career where I'm like setting up HubSpot for both sales and marketing and like lead scoring and doing all the admin stuff on that. So I love it because I love flows. And again, I like thinking about, to me, it's where sales and customer support, customer journey, relationship building, they all come together. So for us, when it comes to email, of course, we have a welcome series, and that welcome series starts from the opt-in, which will define it. I think everyone knows, but name, email, phone number. And we try to make sure, again, we're breaking down as many barriers as possible. We're breaking down that friction. So if anyone is apprehensive or wondering if they can do this or this is for them, it's like literally just get in studio. Our franchisees are amazing at selling memberships, and generally if they get them in the studio, like it still baffles me to this day how many times they can have someone come in for a single class and that person at the end of the class has purchased a 12-month membership. Like, as a consumer, for me, I would be like, maybe I'm just a little less trusting, I don't know, but I'm like, no, I want to have like a little bit more interaction with you. But people, they have such a great experience, and then it's like, boom, here's the offer, come join us, and people are in. But again, we have to get them in the studio for them to be able to have that sales interaction. So a lot of what we do, like I said, welcome series, where we're providing like, hey, here's a video on what to expect. You're probably nervous. Here's how we sort of immerse you into things that you might not know as a newbie to the studio, like little details. And, anyone could apply this to their own type of model. But for example, we put our gloves on top of our boxing bags before class to say that you're kind of reserving that spot. So something simple that maybe someone could observe when they get there, but we're trying to confirm those things up front. Or, how early do you need to arrive for class? Or we don't wear shoes in our class. So that might be something that someone's maybe not expecting. And maybe they don't want to be barefoot and they'd rather wear socks. So we're trying to give them as much information up front, even showing them like, how do you punch? How do you kick? Like the basics of it. So before they even get in there, we're giving them a lot of information. What was that?
Thumb in the middle. And put your thumb down, wrap your fingers around it, right?
Yep. So all of those things. And I mean, that's another great point too. Like there's a lot of nuances to boxing where you have to wrap your hands. You need gloves. Like it's a lot more than, I used to own a cycling studio and love it, but it's, there's a lot of nuances to boxing that you might not have in a yoga studio or a different type of studio, and things that people need to know before they get in.
As
So
somebody
we
who's
try to
done both,
really,
it's quite a bit more technical. Kickboxing, especially, is a whole lot
100%.
more technical than cycling. The whole like turning my heel and like pivoting my hips took longer than I'd like to admit to like learn how to actually kick without trying to blow my knees out.
100%. And I still feel like anytime I go to class, that is the feedback I get too. They're like, no, yeah, protect your back, don't do that. But exactly. So it's like, there's a little bit more that they need to know. So we use email heavily for that. We also use it for even upselling. So like simple things of, they are most likely going to have to buy gloves. Like we can do loaner gloves, but loaner gloves are not great for a long period of time. You might use them once or twice, but you probably want your own gloves that you sweat in versus a bunch of other people. So even being able to say like, hey, maybe they do make it into their first class, offering them a discount on gloves, or sending them that referral request or whatever it may be. So we do a lot of messaging kind of on the next steps of like what action we want them to take once they're paying attention to us, because that's always key, right? Like we talk about not changing consumers at the top of the funnel because they're not bought in yet, but once they're bought in, you can do a little bit more of like suggesting of, hey, and it's a benefit, right? Like, or get 25% off of your first, purchase of merch. Like, here you go, whatever it may be, even outside of gloves. Maybe you want a shirt, maybe you want this. So we do a lot of that through email as well. And then we do also, how do we continue to provide value? Because again, a lot of these people are new to their fitness journey. So can we explain to them things about, the dimensions of wellness and why they should continue this journey? Can we share pitfalls that they might have experienced from other places on their fitness journey, of like fad dieting or quick fixes or things that, of course, the fitness industry is unfortunately just littered with. So we try to also provide additional education there as well. So there's a lot that we do to kind of encourage them. And, I could share more campaigns of like different journeys that we've done that are a little bit more supportive for people that are timid, but that's kind of the general approach.
Gotcha. I'd love to double click on one of these email campaigns. And if you're in sales development, like earmuffs time, because the reply rates that people get from marketing are going to be different. They're not better. They're not worse. They might seem better. They might be better, but they're going to be, they're certainly going to be different depending on the audience you're going to. And I don't think it really there's no difference between, there are differences between the tools, but it's all just email going over generally SMTP, IMAP. The context is so important here in who you're emailing, why you're emailing, how much what a relationship you have with these individuals. And so if you're a sales development rep and you're listening and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get the same rates as somebody in marketing who's already earned the relationship with that prospect or with that customer, it's going to be different. I still think there are things we can learn from Jenell here, but I just thought I'd throw that caveat that don't try and replicate this and expect to get the exact same results with a different context, a buyer in a different context. So with that disclaimer,
these are not cold emails. So
yeah,
there's a lot has been done. I always tell like our franchisees, and I mean, this is really true unless you're buying lists, but email isn't first touch attribution. It might be last touch attribution, but it's not going to be first. So,
mhm.
and for us, there's a lot that happens with those emails versus, I worked on B2B with B2B sales teams and SDRs. Like, they're just like shooting for the moon and being like, I hope somebody answers this. Like, how do we get their attention? That's very different than, these types of emails.
Mhm. And so maybe talk to me about like, what's the coldest email campaign? Maybe something in support of like a paid media offer where somebody has maybe converted from paid to landing page. You now have their email address. How do you get them to go from, all right, you clicked on an ad on social media, now I've got you in my database. How do you think about converting that person? What type of campaign do you put them in?
Yeah.
And can we all replicate it for free with no cost and no investment in email deliverability?
Yeah, I don't know that part, but I would say, so we do the welcome series, which I kind of already referenced. That goes to anyone that just opts in, and it's kind of, assuming a little bit that they're going to take the next step of actually taking class. So we give them all that information. But then the biggest thing that we have actually seen lately is we get a lot of people on our challenges. And so challenges are obviously saturated in the fitness industry. But I share the story, and I'm sure like if any of our franchisees would listen to this, they would probably roll their eyes because I'm always talking about the story, but I think it's so important. And it's, someone we've named Molly, and this is an actual consumer, not her actual name, but she opted in, I think it was maybe October of 2019, and didn't really do very much. We obviously can track when people click on our website, we can see all their behavior and follow that journey. And finally started interacting with us again in November of 2021. So basically opted in, did absolutely nothing. Of course, COVID in 2020, so there's like some nuances to maybe, why there's no interaction in that period. But we ended up sending out an at-home workout campaign and flow. And so this was something that was free. So when you talk about providing value, and again, breaking down barriers, breaking down friction point, where it's like, hey, here is 5 free at-home workouts. We're going to send them out every other day. Check them out, kind of experience what we do in maybe the comfort of your own home. Because we know from our personas, one of the biggest barriers that we hear is people think they need to be more fit before they can start a gym membership, which I understand, but like logically you're like, well, no, that's why you get the gym membership. But again, it's like that intimidation. So we find like what is preventing someone from taking that next step. Okay, we know that that's something we hear pretty often. So let's give them the ability to maybe get a little bit more fit at home and get a little bit more comfortable. So in Molly's story, we kind of saw that, clicked on those emails, opened them, went to our YouTube videos, and so we can see that interaction there. And then kind of was back on our landing page again for that intro offer, but never bought. Kind of goes silent again for a long period of time. And then we, continue just to send out general emails to our list of anyone that's been active. So we have a sale, kind of see some interaction there again. And then we have a 5-day challenge. And so again, versus maybe where people are like, oh my gosh, a 6-week challenge or whatever challenges are out there, that's a lot. It was like, hey, can you just come to the studio for 5 days straight? That's it. That's the challenge. And for some people, that is a lot. I mean, if you're not working out 5 days back to back, would be strenuous, but probably still doable. And so she ended up actually signing up for that challenge, which got her then to purchase the intro offer, which then got her to purchase a membership. But it almost took 3 years. So we share that story a lot to our franchisees, and this is applicable again. Our franchisees are basically our sales team, because you have this pool of leads that maybe they weren't ready to buy at the time. They had some sort of interest, but life happened. I mean, for all we know, she could have gotten another gym membership and maybe she just got bored of that or didn't like it or whatever it may be. And we just kind of continued to sprinkle in value and ways to stay top of mind. So I think that's huge, and that applies B2B, B2C, of just how can you provide value to the people that you're reaching out to, because especially if you're cold emailing, again, we have a little bit more history, but you got to get someone's attention and you got to provide them value and say like, hey, this is why what I'm saying is worth you taking time out of your day. And we all know that time is one of the most precious resources. So we really try to focus on that as well, even in B2C, which I know in B2B, that was the biggest thing we was focused on is, what can you provide and how can you break someone's attention?
The thing that I wrote down as like a note to myself is understanding the barriers and figuring out what is preventing people from taking that next step, and then creating free content and building an offer around that. And I think to me, I was like, wow, that is 100% applicable to sales development, to B2B, to B2C, to pretty much anything. And I'm 100% going to steal that. I've got a few ideas. We do a lot of stuff around ebooks. I even wrote like steal this for ebook campaign that I think this is going to be super helpful, because it's, as a sales development rep, or sales development manager, or anybody involved in orchestrating these sequences, campaigns, I come back to the crop rotation. If you got a great account, you got a great set of contacts, but they're just not ready to buy yet, how do you keep them engaged, and how do you help move them along? And to your point previously, you can't send them anything that's going to trick them or convince them or push them into being ready to convert, but you can drop a couple of tools in front of them and see if they pick it up. And I love this approach because I think it's so subtle and so, so applicable to our situation as well. So yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah,
Anything?
I was gonna say, I can even speak from like the B2B side of just as someone
Yeah.
that I'm sure I would be on someone's LinkedIn list to sell to. And I see a lot. And I think it's that fine line. And I try to remember this, whether B2B or B2C, of providing value, but without the over expectation of the sale. And so I share that because I see a lot of salespeople, again, that I interact with, where they'll do a really good job of maybe providing value, but then almost become like very pushy towards the end. And so it's like, are you providing value because like that is a part of your brand's mission and the things you care about? And I know that's probably not, as like all the salespeople out there are probably like, oh no, don't say that. But I've had that backfire too. So I just try to keep that in mind as a marketer of like, can we provide value? And then yes, say like, hey, here's this inter offer, whatever it may be, but in kind of like a subtle way, not like oh, I provided you value, but now I'm going to like very aggressively reach out to you, and for some companies, I think that works. Like you kind of just push them out and like, you're like, nope, this isn't a good lead anymore. But to me as a marketer, I like to think, again, the long game. I would rather have someone that we provide value to and they eventually convert in a year, versus knowing that maybe they're not ready yet and like aggressively selling to them just to have them be like, I don't want to talk to you anymore now because you kind of, you push too hard. And now I'm not going to consider you when it's actually time for me to make that decision. Or when I'm like, oh, I have this need or this problem that I want to solve. Oh, hey, I talked to Collin like a couple of months ago. He might actually have a solution. Like I should get back on the phone with him if they had just provided me value. And then they was like, hey, no pressure, but here's an offer. Let me know if it works for you. Like that's a very different conversation. So I think we try to take that approach in our marketing. And I just see that missed a lot. If I know a lot of salespeople, listen to this podcast of people that try to sell to me. And then I'm like, okay, no, I'm good. I respect what you do. I've done it and I know it's hard, but you pushed me too far now.
I think what you hit on was like, I think a big challenge with, I think it's a challenge for a lot of sales leaders, and it results in like maybe some suboptimal behaviors for salespeople, is that there's just a ton of project in the next 90 days or you're worthless to me attitude out there. And I'm seeing it less and less, but I think this is where that push, or the pushiness, or that there must be momentum here, and I'm going to do everything I can to like see if there is anything, or you're worthless to me. It's a very temporary kind of mindset of like, there has to be something here. This is a great offer. Why aren't you ready? Ready, follow. And then you're like, okay, this was too much pressure and not supportive enough that like it sets the tone or the context of the relationship that now you're just a pushy person and you're not actually here to help. You're here to like push your help on me. Where I think what is really more helpful is to sit back and, not to never follow up, but to be a little bit more, I guess, mindful of the timing and the intensity of those follow-ups.
Yeah, well, it's sort of the give to get transactional relationship that eventually turns people off. You're like, oh, like I can give a very, I hesitate to do this, but I'll give maybe a specific example without naming the company. But I had a company
Yes.
invite me to speak on a webinar, and I was super excited. I was like, oh yeah, I love talking about marketing. This is great. And I spoke on the webinar, and they definitely they did a great job of just being like, hey, come share your wisdom. This is like fun, good networking opportunity. And then they sold me really, really hard and would not leave me alone. And I was like, did you actually care about what I had to say on the webinar? Or did you just want an excuse to, get in my inbox and, then reach out to me every 3 days and be like, bye. And I'm like, I just wanted to share my value and have some people, like have that interaction. So I think, again, there's that fine line of I get outreach, I get following up. I mean, it would be silly if they didn't reach out to me afterwards and like ask me for a demo. But then, the aggressiveness of it, I think sometimes is like, oh man, like I was just really hoping I provided some good value to your listeners. you know?
Totally.
And so I think
Which
like that's kind of a good example of something I've gone through recently. Where I'm like,
it's a great reminder that now it's time for you to buy some sales development reps from me. I've got I can help you sell you some that you can rent for your team. I could help you hire a couple for you. We could do that for you. I could do coach.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're like,
She's
oh
like,
man.
she's talking about this podcast.
No. But no, you'd be great about that then too. Because again, I think even if you did, at some point, if I do need sales development reps, I would think of you. It's almost like because we've had a relationship, we've spent time, we had the intro call, we've had this conversation, we've stayed in contact. You're going to be top of mind when I have a need that needs to be met. And sure, like maybe you reach out and you're like, hey, Jenell, just a heads up, we're doing da 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 around whatever. And I'd be like, oh, cool, not interested right now, no big deal, but thanks for letting me know. And then you'd be like, cool, well, here if you need me. And I'd be like, cool, fantastic. But it's like, I think it's the overdoing it. And again, we have to be, I think marketing has the same downfall, which is why I bring it up. Of like, if you're always just like, buy, sale, people are like, okay, like, and sometimes that works, right? But
Mhm.
I think from how I approach marketing and I approach branding, I would rather be a brand that gives value just for the sake of wanting to have impact in the people that we are serving. And then they will find us if we are a good fit. And yes, we will still sell things, of course, and we will still let you know if we have sales, but that is not the only thing we're here to do.
I hear that. I can't think of anything worse than like Jedi mind tricking somebody into showing up to a intro kickboxing class who isn't ready and doesn't want to be there. Like that's going to be not a good experience.
For no one. And it's also for us, it hurts the rest of the class too.
Mhm.
To be honest, like you're just hurting your members. And in addition, so like, oh, here are all these people that, yeah, don't want to be here or like, or whatever it may be. I mean, we don't know people's personal stories. Like, I think it is important to be mindful, whether you're a marketer or in sales, of just your approach.
100%. And I think that's such a relevant point. It makes it really easy to segue into the next kind of channel, which is the most dangerous channel that you really need to be careful of if you're in sales or probably marketing, maybe a bit less so if they've already given you permission to phone them and text them. But SMS, I've run some cold SMS campaigns. They had 100% reply rates, but they were not positive. And so I'm curious what SMS looks like on your side. When do you use it? Where do you use it? And what do conversion rates kind of look like for you?
Yeah, so full transparency, this is actually something that we're just starting to use. Um, and so kind of what we're thinking of and how we're approaching it is, yes, we used it in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and it was really to get the sale out. So, maybe I'm speaking from both sides of my mouth, but it is a part of it, right? We still announce it and let you know, like, hey, we're doing the sale. We typically don't do this. But what we really want it to be and what we're building out and the team's doing right now, again, is is value add. So when we think about SMS, if someone's going to give you their phone number, to your exact point of people getting mad, and especially in this remote world, like I will throw out that I know for myself and even a lot of other people, if you're texting me, it's my personal phone. It's not actually a work phone. Everything else is basically done digitally. So I think you have, in B2B, kind of even more so than maybe B2C, but like you have that level of responsibility as a marketer, as a salesperson, to be respectful that texting is like how we interact with family. It's how we interact with friends more so than email or any other platform. So I really think as a marketer, we try to be as respectful as possible of that channel, still knowing that, yes, like people, of course, have opted into this. So like for us, it's like, okay, well, you give us your phone number. You said you wanted to receive marketing from us. So yes, it's a little bit different. But one of the things that we're really trying to focus on is, again, how do we provide value? So for our group of, segment of people, we can send them motivational tips. We can send them technique, tips. We can just send them, some like attaboys even, or attagirls, whatever you want to call it, but things just to be like, hey, it's Monday, let's get after it. Super excited, whatever it may be. And I think sometimes those things like, hey, that's actually really cool. I've had brands that I've worked, or subscribed to that do that and just provide a ton of value. And I will tell you, the second they are selling something, I buy it. Sometimes even if I don't need it, just because I respect how much value they have given me over the years. And I'm like, I should really support you. Like, you've been providing me all this value for either free or a very low cost or whatever it may be. So, and this gets in a little bit of like more personas, but I think brands can learn a lot more from people that have personal brands. Of if I have someone that's just been sharing value with me day in and day out, whether it be through a podcast, whether it be through SMS subscriptions, and they have a book, they have a product, I'm like, you know what, I'll buy it. Why not? I'm sure I'll read it. You've provided me value before, and I will give you that money because I appreciate that you didn't ask me for anything for a really long time and you let me ride this train for free of value. So I think that like applies, and I hope brands start to apply that more, because I think it works really well. And again, I think everyone wins from it.
Totally. I was just looking at my phone because I was like, have I been texting with anybody, or have I received any marketing promo text? And the only one I saw was an SDR who left me a voicemail. And I get so many junk calls that are, maybe it's an SDR team using a power dialer, but it seems more likely that it's a scam, automated nonsense. But when I do receive a voicemail from an SDR, that's not a voicemail dump where it's like, hey, Collin, just wanted to leave you a note to talk about, oh my God, no. But if you do actually go through the hassle of leaving me a voicemail, I probably won't call you back, but I definitely will text you back. And I've noticed myself doing that because all these spam callers, they've just nuked my phone. Like, I don't have notifications on anything. And so it's really hard to get through, but I've noticed that I've started texting with salespeople more and more frequently. And I actually unsubscribed from somebody who I know personally was WhatsApping me their sales stuff. And I was like, listen, it's not, WhatsApp is like my personal, where I coordinate with like my family and I trash talk with my friends, and I don't want to see work stuff in here. So like, this is my personal folder. If you want to do stuff, cool, but like, Slack me that, email me that. And so it's been interesting just watching my own habits form around like too much. And sometimes where I'm actually like going out and just texting a salesperson, because it's easier to let them know like, hey, thanks. Or this person specifically is a man saying, hey, thanks. Like, appreciate the call, but not interested. Here's the objection that I think you're going to understand. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a really good point around segmentation, and we have the technology. Maybe that's why we didn't do it in the past, but just ask people, like, as a salesperson, as a marketer, whoever it is, do you want emails? Do you want text? Like, is there a better channel to reach out on, especially if you have their attention? And that's something I didn't mention this, but in our welcome series, we even do this from a segmentation standpoint of, we ask people what they care about. Like, why did they even bother opting in? Why are you here? Do you want motivation? Are you looking for body transformation? Are you looking for community? Are you looking for accountability? And they tell us. And now I have a list of people that I know actually care about sales and promotions. Or they want motivation, or they're looking for things that are related to body transformation or whatever it may be. And so then we can say, oh, well, we have this thing that relates to this need. Okay, you told me you want this. So like we did this in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and I don't have the stats pulled up, but just of people that specifically said they like sales and promotions, like we tossed in a little extra discount code for those people that wasn't available on their site, just because they took the time to interact with us and tell us that they liked sales and promotions. So it's like, here you go, get an extra 15% off, and just, see
Cool.
what that yields, but you told us and you took the time to tell us. And I mean, I appreciate that as a marketer. So you didn't have to click on my email. So, I think just things like that, when we think about it from a sales or a marketing standpoint, of one, like you can ask and you can get curious, and again, still be respectful of people's time. And then two, you can follow through and provide a value, because if someone took the time to actually tell you that, well, yeah, do something with it that matches what they're looking for.
Love it. I feel like I've taken so much of your time, and this could be that unlimited episode where we just keep going on and on and on, which
Yeah.
I'm good at, but people probably don't want to listen to another 4-hour talk on all the different things. I've really enjoyed having you on the show. I'm curious, did we miss anything on SMS or email or paid media that we were hoping to talk about? I feel like we covered a pretty broad outline today. Is there anything you feel like we missed?
I'm looking at my notes that I took. I can maybe chime this in. I don't think this is going to be groundbreaking to anybody, but we work with small business owners, and so a lot of what is on my mind, and I think this is applicable to startups, or a lot of people, is just managing your budget and making
Mhm.
sure that you're being mindful of limited budgets. And that's also one of the reasons why I really love email and even SMS to a certain extent, because you can have really powerful interactions and messaging to that segmentation, like we just talked about, that is very
Mhm.
specific and very focused and very valuable for a very low cost. I even think about, we'll send out an email campaign, and I'll give you general numbers. Let's say we pay $1,000 a month for our email provider, but if we get 20 units sold from a campaign that month, and with an average sales price of $50, you cover that cost. And that doesn't include the build up and the relationship that you're developing for people that maybe aren't ready to buy yet. So I just think when people they can get stuck on top of funnel, which we know is important, but you've already paid for those leads. So just like remember that you have other tools that are less expensive to just like continue to hopefully get some additional conversions with slight additional cost, I guess. You could probably do the math of how much that would be per lead as you break it down, but you kind of get that idea. It's a lower cost, and we'll have studios that sometimes are, again, in a downturn of a time where they're like, man, I don't know if I can afford my typical ad budget this month. And it's like, okay, work your database with SMS, with email. I mean, our franchisees call too, which again, I think just being mindful of, because that's not always my favorite as a consumer in the fitness industry, but some people love it. So it kind of just depends on the approach to it and who it is. And again, that's where I think it just comes to like asking people to like, do you prefer phone call? Do you prefer email? Do you prefer text? We're seeing that a lot more frequently, and people are definitely going to be more receptive if we communicate with them on the channels that they like to be communicated with.
I love that. And it's so refreshing to hear from somebody on the other side of the pond that the rule of thumb I go with is, if 5% of the market is in a buying mode, that means 95% of the people that you talk to, that you're outbounding to, that you book meetings with, are going to need to be worked and nurtured for a period of like 4 to 5 sales cycles on average. And so how do you make sure you work that relationship over a long period of time, as opposed to just one and done? If there's something there in 90 days, that's great. If not, then they're garbage and they go in the CRM and die. Like, it's such a valuable piece of advice. And I love that.
Yeah. And if you're a salesperson, I mean, and you have a marketing team, like I said, I used to work B2B really close with my sales team. And that was my favorite, when they're like, we have these cool leads and we need help nurturing. And I'm like, yes, let's find a way to do something fun or weird, or, something just to provide value or whatever it may be. Like, let's talk through, Yeah, and I guess I share this with the marketer listens to this too, but like talk to your sales team and be like, what objections are they hearing? You know, all the things that I think we know, and I'm even saying this now, and I'm like, I should probably talk to some franchisees soon too, and just check back in and say like, hey, where are you getting those friction points, or where do you feel like people are falling out of the flow or the funnel? Because we can learn from each other, because it is, you know, full circle, or all the way, you know, beginning to end, whatever you want to consider it, but just making sure it's not like the hot potato that you know, toss over the giant river where the sales team or the marketing team's on the other side. And you're like, have fun with that, you know, good luck. Like, no, we can learn from each other. Let's talk.
I love that. And the episode with a little kumbaya between sales and marketing.
I love it. That's my favorite. Everyone's like, sales and marketing will always fight. I'm like, no, they will not. I've worked at companies where we got along great. Like, there might be some friction, but
totally. Our marketing team makes it so much easier for the sales development reps. It's
exactly. So awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate being able to come on and share some of my experiences, and hopefully this is helpful to your audience kind of in the theme. And
we're
hopefully
not even going to publish this one. I'm just here so that I can sell you some sales development later.
There you go. See? You know, you listen. There you go.
if people that are, if anybody does listen, of course, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? If they say, hey, I want to do some kickboxing, or I want to learn some marketing tactics from you, or if they want to connect with you on LinkedIn because they want to come work for you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn is a great option for me. As I mentioned kind of before, that's my preferred channel when people reach out. So definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure my name will be in the show notes. I think I'm the only Jenell Riesner who spells her name this way on the internet. So pretty easy to find. Otherwise, you can always search for iLoveKickboxing too, and I'm sure I'll pop up.
Cool. And we'll throw a link to Jennell's LinkedIn profile in the show notes, so you can just click on it and hit her up there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Right. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on the show, Jennell. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see y'all next week.